This 1889 saloon photo looks peaceful, until you zoom in on what the gambler's holding under the table. Robert Chen was helping his elderly neighbor, Mrs. Eleanor Hayes, clean out her attic in Tucson, Arizona, when he found the wooden crate tucked behind a rolled-up carpet. It was May 2024, and Eleanor, at 92, had finally decided to downsize before moving to an assisted living facility. "What's in here?" Robert asked, pulling the dusty crate into the light. Eleanor peered at it, adjusting her glasses. "I have no idea. That belonged to my grandfather, I think. He died before I was born. My mother always said he kept photographs and papers from his time in Tombstone, but I never bothered to look." Inside the crate, carefully wrapped in old newspapers dated 1923, were dozens of glass plate negatives and several printed photographs. Robert, a freelance photographer with an interest in historical images, felt his pulse quicken. Glass plates from the 1880s and 1890s, if properly preserved, could yield extraordinary detail when digitized. One photograph immediately caught his attention. It showed the interior of a saloon, ornate wooden bar, hanging oil lamps, a large mirror behind rows of bottles. 8 men sat around a felt-covered table in the foreground playing cards. All were dressed in typical frontier attire. Vests, white shirts, some with bandanas, others with bow ties. Cards were spread across the table, coins and bills visible as stakes. Glasses of whiskey sat within easy reach. The men looked relaxed, even jovial. One was mid-laugh, his head thrown back. Another leaned forward, studying his cards intently. It was a scene of masculine camaraderie and leisure, the kind of image that defined popular imagination of the Old West. On the back of the photograph, written in faded ink, Crystal Palace Saloon, Tombstone, Arizona Territory, April 16th, 1889. Final game. "Final game," Robert repeated. "That's an odd thing to write. Final before what?" Eleanor shrugged. "My grandfather owned a saloon in Tombstone in the 1880s. Maybe it was the last game of the night." Robert carefully examined the photograph. Something about it felt staged, almost theatrical. The positioning of the men seemed too deliberate, their expressions a bit too casual. "Mrs. Hayes, would you mind if I took this home to scan? I have equipment that can bring out details invisible to the naked eye. There might be more to this photograph than meets the eye." "Take it, dear. Take all of it. At my age, the past is more burden than treasure." Robert carried the crate home, not knowing he was about to uncover one of the most elaborate deceptions in Old West history. Robert spent the evening carefully cleaning the glass plate negative and preparing it for high-resolution scanning. The technology he used, a specialized scanner capable of capturing images at 4800 dpi, could reveal details that would have been impossible to see in 1889, even with magnification. As the scan progressed, Robert watched the image materialize on his monitor with stunning clarity. The grain of the wooden table, the pattern on the playing cards, the individual bristles on one man's mustache, everything emerged with remarkable precision. He began examining the image systematically, zooming in on each person's face, studying their expressions and posture. Most of the men looked genuinely engaged in the card game, but one man, seated on the left side of the table, had an expression that didn't quite match the others. His smile seemed forced, his eyes not focused on his cards but darting slightly to the side toward another player. Robert zoomed in further on this man. He appeared to be in his early 30s, lean, with dark hair and a neatly trimmed beard. Unlike the others, he wore a vest with an unusual bulge on the left side, possibly a concealed weapon. Then Robert moved his examination to the area beneath the table. The tablecloth hung to mid-shin on the seated men, but there were gaps where light penetrated the shadows underneath. Robert adjusted the contrast and brightness, enhancing the darkened areas, and there it was. The man with the forced smile, the one whose eyes had been watching another player, was holding something under the table. Not cards, not money, a gun, a Colt. .45 revolver, partially visible in the enhanced image, gripped in his right hand and pointed directly at another man seated across from him. Robert sat back, his heart racing. This wasn't a friendly card game. This was a confrontation frozen in time. A moment of deadly tension, disguised as leisure. He needed to find out who these men were and what had happened after this photograph was taken. Robert called the Arizona Historical Society first thing the next morning and spoke with Dr. Lisa Martinez, a historian specializing in Tombstone's post-OK Corral period. "Dr. Martinez, I found a photograph from the Crystal Palace Saloon in 1889. One of the men in it is holding a gun under the table, pointed at another player. The caption says, 'Final game.' Do you have any records of what that might mean?" There was a long pause. "Send me the image immediately. If it's what I think it is, you found something extraordinary. Doctor?" Martinez called Robert back within 2 hours, her voice urgent with excitement. "Robert, this photograph documents the capture of William Billy Graves, one of the most wanted outlaws in the Southwest. I need to see the original." They met at the Historical Society that afternoon. Dr. Martinez had brought files, newspaper clippings, and wanted posters from the 1880s, spreading them across a conference table. "Oh, Billy Graves," she said, pointing to a yellowed wanted poster showing a sketch of a man with sharp features and cold eyes. Wanted for bank robbery, stagecoach robbery, and the murder of 2 Wells Fargo guards in 1887. The reward was $5,000, an enormous sum at the time. She pulled out a newspaper clipping from the tombstone epitaph, dated April 17th, 1889. Notorious outlaw captured in Crystal Palace. William Graves, wanted in connection with numerous robberies and murders, was apprehended yesterday evening by bounty hunter Thomas Doc Thompson during a poker game. The capture was accomplished without violence, and Graves is now in custody awaiting trial. Robert looked at the photograph again, then at the wanted poster. Which one is Graves? Doctor. Martinez pointed to a man seated directly across from the one holding the gun, a man with a handlebar mustache and an easy smile, looking completely relaxed. That's Graves. And this one, she indicated the man with the hidden revolver, is Doc Thompson, the bounty hunter. So Thompson was holding Graves at gunpoint while they played cards? Apparently. According to newspaper accounts, Thompson had been tracking Graves for months. He finally located him in Tombstone, but Graves was always surrounded by associates who would have helped him escape or fight back. So Thompson arranged this poker game, invited several neutral parties to fill out the table, and waited for the right moment to reveal himself. Robert studied Thompson's face in the photograph, the forced smile, the watchful eyes. He's waiting for something. Look at his posture. He's ready to move. The newspaper says Thompson announced his identity immediately after this photograph was taken. He had arranged for the saloon owner to document the moment. I think your neighbor's grandfather must have been that owner. Thompson wanted proof of the capture, evidence that it had been done without unnecessary violence. But look at Graves, Robert said, zooming in on the outlaw's face. He doesn't look worried. He looks confident. Dr. Martinez leaned closer. You're right. That's strange. A man with a gun pointed at him should show some sign of stress. Unless he knew something Thompson didn't. They spent the next hour examining every detail of the photograph, identifying the other men at the table through city directories and newspaper accounts. Most were local merchants and gamblers, likely invited by Thompson to make the game seem legitimate. But one man, seated to Graves' right, caught Robert's attention. He was young, perhaps early 20s, with a nervous expression distinctly different from the others. His hands were visible on the table, but his body was angled slightly toward Graves, as if ready to move. Who is this? Robert asked. Dr. Martinez checked her notes. Samuel Carter, listed in the 1889 city directory as a ranch hand. No criminal record, no notable history. He looks scared. Everyone else looks calm or focused on the game, but this kid looks terrified. Maybe he knew what was about to happen, Dr. Martinez said. Or maybe he was part of it. Dr. Martinez found more detailed accounts of the capture in archived personal correspondence. A letter from the Crystal Palace's owner, George Hayes, Eleanor's grandfather, to his brother in California, dated April 20th, 1889, provided the most complete description. Robert read it aloud. Dear brother, I witnessed the most remarkable event last Tuesday. Doc Thompson, a bounty hunter I'd known for some years, approached me and asked to use my saloon for a special poker game. He paid me $50 to arrange it, to invite specific men, and to have my camera ready at a precise moment. I gathered 8 men total, Thompson, the outlaw he was hunting, though I didn't know who he was at first, and 6 others who had no idea what was really happening. The game proceeded normally for about an hour. Cards were dealt, money changed hands, whiskey was consumed. Then Thompson gave me the signal. He removed his hat and set it on the table. I positioned my camera and prepared the flash powder. The moment before I took the photograph, Thompson had already drawn his revolver under the table, though none of the other players knew it yet. I captured the image, and immediately after, Thompson stood, gun now visible, and announced, Gentlemen, my name is Thomas Thompson, and I am a bounty hunter. The man seated across from me is William Graves, wanted for murder and robbery. Mr. Graves, you are under arrest. If you move, I will shoot you. If any of you other gentlemen interfere, I will consider you accomplices and treat you accordingly. The shock on everyone's faces was profound. Graves himself seemed stunned. He'd been caught completely unaware, or so it appeared. What happened next surprised everyone even more. Robert looked up at Dr. Martinez. What happened? She pulled out another newspaper clipping, and this one from April 25th, 1889. Captured outlaw dies in custody. William Graves, arrested last week by bounty hunter Doc Thompson, was found dead in his jail cell yesterday morning. Authorities report he died of heart failure, though some citizens have questioned this conclusion given Graves's relative youth and apparent health. He died a week after being captured? Yes, and it gets stranger. Dr. Martinez showed Robert another clipping from May 1889. Bounty hunter leaves Tombstone. Thomas Thompson, who captured the outlaw William Graves last month, has left Arizona territory. Sources report he traveled to California, where he claimed the $5,000 reward for Graves' capture. Thompson's sudden departure has raised questions among some residents who wonder why he did not stay for Graves' trial. Robert frowned. So Thompson captured Graves, Graves mysteriously died in jail before trial, and Thompson collected the reward and left town immediately. Exactly. And here's the final piece. Dr. Martinez pulled out a land deed record from 1890. 1 year after these events, Thomas Thompson purchased a large ranch in Northern California, a property valued at $15,000, far more than the $5,000 reward would have covered. You think Thompson had more money than the reward alone? I think this entire capture was staged. I think Graves and Thompson were working together. Dr. Martinez and Robert spent the next week digging through archives, following the trail of both Thompson and Graves backward through time, looking for any connection between them before 1889. They found it in Texas. In 1885, a bank in Austin had been robbed by a gang of 4 men. One of the robbers, according to witness descriptions, matched William Graves, but the investigation had also mentioned a suspicious detail. A man identified as T. Morrison had been seen watching the bank for several days before the robbery, taking notes and sketching the layout. T. Morrison had disappeared after the robbery and was never found. But Robert discovered something in an 1886 census record from El Paso. Thomas Morrison Thompson, age 28, occupation listed as security consultant. Morrison was Thompson's middle name, Robert said. He was scouting banks for Graves to rob. They found more connections. In 1886, a stagecoach carrying gold had been robbed in New Mexico. Graves was suspected but never caught. 3 days before the robbery, a man matching Thompson's description had applied for a job as a stagecoach guard on that very route, been rejected, but had been seen talking extensively with the guards about routes and timing. He was gathering information, Dr. Martinez said, then feeding it to Graves. In 1887, the robbery that had put the largest bounty on Graves' head, the killing of 2 Wells Fargo guards, had occurred in southern Arizona. Witness statements described one of the robbers as unusually calm and professional, while another had been brutal and violent. One witness mentioned that the calm one had seemed to be trying to prevent the violence. But the other robber had killed the guards anyway. What if Thompson was there? Robert suggested. What if he was part of Graves's gang, but after the guards were killed, he realized the bounty would be too high and decided to switch sides? Dr. Martinez pulled up wanted posters from 1887, 1889. Look at this. After the Wells Fargo robbery, the reward for Graves was $5,000, a fortune. But there were also rewards for other members of his gang. $2,000 for Samuel Carter, $500 for James Reed, $1,000 for anyone with information. Samuel Carter, that's the nervous kid in the photograph, Robert said. Yes, he was part of Graves' gang, which means at that poker table, Thompson wasn't just facing Graves, he was surrounded by gang members. Unless they were all in on it together. They returned to the photograph, examining it with new understanding. Graves looked confident because he knew what was happening. Carter looked nervous because he was playing a role, and Thompson had arranged the entire scene to look like a legitimate capture while actually orchestrating an elaborate deception. But why? Robert asked. Why stage a fake capture? Dr. Martinez thought for a moment. Because the reward was only paid if Graves was brought in alive. And because once Graves died in custody, no trial meant no testimony, no evidence presented, no risk of accomplices being identified. Thompson collected the reward, and Graves got a new identity and freedom. We need to find out what happened to Graves after he supposedly died. Robert requested Graves' death certificate from the Cochise County Records Office. When it arrived, several details immediately seemed suspicious. The certificate listed cause of death as heart failure, but provided no other medical details. The examining physician was listed as Dr. J. Miller, but Robert could find no record of any doctor by that name practicing in Tombstone in 1889. The death was reported by T. Thompson, arresting officer, who claimed to have found Graves dead in his cell during a routine check. There had been no autopsy, and the body had been buried within 24 hours. Unusually quick, even for 1889. Most significantly, the burial location was listed as Boot Hill Cemetery, unmarked grave, Section C. But when Robert checked Boot Hill's records, there was no entry for William Graves in April 1889. In fact, there were no burials in Section C that entire month. The body was never actually buried, Robert said. Or someone else was buried under Graves' name. Dr. Martinez found a small newspaper notice from May 1889 that had been overlooked in earlier research. County Sheriff reports that the body of William Graves, who died in custody last week, was claimed by a family member and transported to Texas for burial in the family plot. Sheriff confirms that proper documentation was filed and the body released to Thomas Thompson, who agreed to escort it to Texas as a courtesy to the family. Thompson took the body to Texas, Dr. Martinez said. Except there was no body. There was a living, breathing William Graves traveling with his partner Thompson, both of them splitting the reward money and heading for new lives. Robert searched for any record of William Graves in Texas after April 1889. He found nothing. No death record, no burial, no family plot containing anyone by that name. But he found something else. In the 1890 census for San Diego, California, there was a listing for William Grant, age 32, ranch foreman. The description matched Graves, same approximate age, same place of birth, Tennessee, same physical description from immigration documents, and living at the same address, Thomas Thompson, age 32, ranch owner. They'd gone to California together, changed Graves' name slightly, and started a new life as respectable ranchers, funded by the reward money Thompson had collected for capturing his partner. It's brilliant, Dr. Martinez said with reluctant admiration. Audacious, criminal, and absolutely brilliant. They turned Graves from a wanted outlaw into a dead man, collected a fortune for his capture, and walked away free and wealthy. But the photograph proves it was staged, Robert said. Look at their faces, their body language. This wasn't a real capture. It was a performance. Yes, but who would have believed it in 1889? Everyone saw what they expected to see. A dangerous outlaw caught by a brave bounty hunter. Only we, 135 years later with digital enhancement, can see the truth hidden under that table. Robert and Dr. Martinez turned their attention to the other men in the photograph, wondering how many of them had been part of the conspiracy, and how many had been unwitting props in Thompson and Graves' performance. They started with Samuel Carter, the nervous young man seated next to Graves. County records showed Carter had left Tombstone in May 1889, just weeks after the stage capture. He appeared next in records from Sacramento, California in 1890, working as, surprisingly, a bank teller. A former outlaw working in a bank, Robert noted. That's bold. Carter lived a seemingly respectable life in Sacramento until his death in 1932. His obituary mentioned that he had been a reformed man who turned away from a troubled youth to build an honest life, but provided no specifics about what that troubled youth had involved. However, Dr. Martinez found something revealing in Carter's personal papers, donated to the Sacramento Historical Society by his descendants. A letter dated 1925, written to an old friend, included this passage. You asked me once about my time in Arizona. I'll tell you this much. I rode with some bad men when I was young and stupid, but I was smart enough to get out before I ended up dead or in prison. Doc Thompson gave me a chance to walk away clean, and I took it. I've spent 40 years being grateful for that chance. Thompson gave him a chance to walk away, Robert said. That suggests Carter was part of the gang, but was allowed to leave as part of the deal. They investigated the other men at the table. 3 were identified as legitimate local merchants who appeared to have no connection to Thompson or Graves before or after the photograph. They had likely been genuine, unwitting participants, invited to make the scene look authentic. But 2 other men drew their attention. James Reed and Michael Sullivan, both listed in Tombstone records as gamblers, both with no fixed address, both leaving Arizona territory in the summer of 1889. Reed appeared next in Montana in 1890, working as a saloon owner. Sullivan surfaced in Oregon, also in 1890, as a horse trader. Both had come into money suddenly, enough to start businesses in new territories. They were paid off, Dr. Martinez concluded. Thompson paid them to participate in the staged capture, to sit at that table and act natural, to corroborate his story afterward. The photograph was revealing itself as even more elaborate than they'd initially thought. Not just Thompson and Graves staging a false capture, but an entire cast of actors, some knowing their roles, others played as dupes. George Hayes, the saloon owner and Eleanor's grandfather, remained the biggest question. Had he been in on the conspiracy, or had Thompson deceived him as well? Robert found his answer in another letter from Hayes to his brother, and this one dated 1920, shortly before Hayes' death. You asked me once if I knew what really happened that night in 1889. I'll tell you now that I'm old, and it doesn't matter anymore. I knew. Thompson paid me $200, not $50. He told me what he and Graves were planning, and he told me that if I kept my mouth shut and took the photograph exactly as instructed, I'd never have to worry about money again. I was greedy and I was desperate. The saloon was failing. I had debts. I had a family to feed. So I did it. I documented a fake capture and I lied to the sheriff, and I helped 2 criminals escape justice and get rich. I've carried that guilt for 31 years. The only thing I can say in my defense is that no one was hurt. Graves and Thompson robbed banks and stages, but after that capture, they stopped. They went to California and lived quiet lives. Maybe I helped end their criminal careers. Or maybe I'm just an old fool trying to justify my sins. Robert looked at Eleanor, who had come to the Historical Society to see what they'd discovered. Your grandfather knew all along. Eleanor was quiet for a long moment. He kept the photograph hidden. Never displayed it, never talked about it. I think he was ashamed. He should have been, Dr. Martinez said, but not unkindly. But he also preserved the evidence. Without this photograph, we'd never know what really happened. Robert traveled to San Diego to research what had happened to Thompson and William Grant, formerly Graves, after they'd relocated to California in 1889. The ranch they'd purchased was in the foothills east of San Diego, a substantial property of 500 acres, specializing in cattle and horses. County records showed it was registered under Thompson's name, with Grant listed as foreman and co-owner. The ranch thrived through the 1890s and early 1900s. Local newspaper articles mentioned Thompson and Grant as respected members of the ranching community, contributing to local charities and serving on business committees. In 1895, Thompson married a local woman, Helen Morrison. They had 3 children. Grant remained unmarried, but was described in various sources as Thompson's business partner and closest friend. The most revealing document Robert found was a journal kept by a neighboring rancher, Edward Phillips, whose papers had been donated to the San Diego Historical Society. Phillips had been friendly with Thompson and Grant, and his journal entries provided insights into their personalities and relationship. From 1897, spent the evening with Thompson and Grant. Both are fine men, though Grant has a melancholy air about him. He mentioned once that he'd had a hard youth and was grateful for the chance to start over. I asked him what he meant, but Thompson changed the subject quickly. There's something in their past they don't speak of. From 1902, Grant has been ill. Thompson tends to him with the devotion of a brother. Whatever bonds those two men share, they run deeper than mere business partnership. I've known them 13 years, and have never seen either speak harshly to the other. From 1910, Grant died today. Heart finally gave out. He was 53, which seems too young, but he'd been frail for years. Thompson is devastated. He told me, William was my brother in all but blood. We survived things together that would have broken most men. I owe him my life, and he owed me his. Now I'm alone with that debt unpaid. I didn't understand what he meant. Grant, the former outlaw William Graves, was buried in a small cemetery near the ranch under his assumed name. The headstone read simply, William Grant, 1857 to 1910, loyal friend. Thompson lived another 15 years, dying in 1925 at age 67. His obituary in the San Diego Union described him as a pioneering rancher and respected citizen, with no mention of his past as a bounty hunter or his connection to outlaw William Graves. But in Thompson's will, Robert found one telling detail. The ranch and all its assets were left to Grant's illegitimate son, a young man named Billy Thompson, who had been raised as Thompson's nephew but was actually Grant's biological child, a secret maintained for decades. They protected each other until the end, Robert said to Dr. Martinez over the phone. And beyond, Thompson made sure Grant's son was provided for, kept the secret of his parentage, maintained Grant's respectable identity, even after death. It's almost touching, Dr. Martinez said, if you can forget that they were criminals who staged a fake capture, defrauded the government, and escaped justice. Maybe they did escape legal justice, Robert said, but Grant lived 21 years under an assumed identity, never able to acknowledge his real name, his past, even his own son. And Thompson lived with the knowledge that his wealth and respectability were built on a lie. That's a kind of punishment. Robert and Dr. Martinez prepared their findings for publication, knowing the story would challenge romanticized notions of Old West justice and honor among outlaws and lawmen alike. In September 2024, the Arizona Historical Society opened an exhibition titled The Capture That Never Was, Deception and Photography in 1889 Tombstone. The centerpiece was the crystal-clear digital scan of the saloon photograph, massively enlarged, with Thompson's hidden revolver visible in devastating detail under the table. Surrounding the photograph were documents they had uncovered. Wanted posters for Graves, newspaper accounts of the capture, the fake death certificate, land records from California, and excerpts from letters and journals that pieced together the truth. But the most powerful element was a side-by-side comparison. The photograph as it appeared to viewers in 1889 versus the enhanced digital version from 2024. In the original, the area under the table was dark and indistinguishable. In the enhanced version, Thompson's revolver was unmistakable. For 135 years, people looked at this photograph and saw what they expected to see, Dr. Martinez explained during the exhibition opening. A dangerous outlaw captured by a brave bounty hunter. But modern technology allows us to see what was really there. A carefully staged performance. Two criminals working together to defraud the government and escape their pasts. The exhibition drew enormous crowds and it generated significant media attention. Western film buffs and history enthusiasts were particularly fascinated by the revelation that one of the era's most celebrated captures had actually been an elaborate con. The New York Times ran a feature. When outlaws wrote their own happy endings, how one photograph reveals the fiction behind Old West justice, but the story also generated controversy. Some historians and Western mythology enthusiasts rejected the interpretation, arguing that Robert and Dr. Martinez were reading too much into the evidence. You're destroying a piece of American history, one critic wrote in a letter to the Historical Society. Doc Thompson was a hero who captured a dangerous criminal. The fact that Graves died in custody doesn't make it a conspiracy. You're tarnishing a good man's legacy based on speculation. Doctor, Martinez responded in a public lecture, history isn't about protecting legacies or preserving comfortable myths. It's about seeking truth, even when that truth is complicated or uncomfortable. The evidence is overwhelming. Thompson and Graves were partners who staged a capture to collect reward money and disappear into respectable lives. That's not speculation, it's documented fact. And acknowledging it doesn't diminish the real complexity of the Old West. If anything, it makes it more interesting. Eleanor Hayes attended the exhibition, viewing her grandfather's photograph with new understanding. I wish he'd told the truth while he was alive, she said. But I understand why he didn't. He made a choice between survival and integrity, and he chose survival. I can't judge him too harshly for that. Robert had ensured that Eleanor received credit for preserving the photograph, and that any proceeds from the exhibition would benefit her. Your grandfather kept the evidence, Robert told her. Maybe out of guilt, maybe out of fear, maybe just because he understood its historical value. But because of him, we know the truth now. 6 months after the exhibition opened, Robert received an unexpected email from a man named William Grant Thompson, living in San Diego. The subject line read, "I'm Doc Thompson's great-grandson, and I know more than you think. They arranged to meet at a coffee shop in San Diego. William was in his 50s, a retired history teacher, and he brought with him a weathered leather journal that had belonged to Doc Thompson. "My family has known the truth for 4 generations," William said, handing Robert the journal. "Thompson wrote this in 1920, 5 years before he died. He wanted the truth preserved, but he made us promise not to reveal it until everyone involved was long dead. He said, 'Wait until it's just history, not scandal. Then tell it.'" Robert opened the journal carefully. Thompson's handwriting was neat and precise, filling page after page with a full confession of the staged capture and its aftermath. Thompson had written, "I met Billy Graves in 1883, and we rode together for 4 years. I was the planner, the cautious one. He was the bold one, the risk-taker. We robbed banks in stages, and I told myself it was justified. We were taking from the rich institutions that exploited common people. But in truth, we were just thieves." In 1887, everything changed. We robbed the Wells Fargo stage in Arizona, and Billy killed 2 guards. I hadn't known he would do it. I'd explicitly told him no violence. But in the moment, he panicked and fired. Those men died because of us, because of me, because I'd planned that robbery. After that, I couldn't continue, but I also couldn't just walk away. Billy knew too much, and I knew if I betrayed him, he'd make sure I went down too. So I came up with the plan: stage A capture, fake his death, split the reward money, and both of us disappear into new identities. It worked perfectly, too perfectly. For 31 years, I've lived as a respectable rancher, raised a family, contributed to my community. I've also lived with the knowledge that 2 men died because of me, and that I never faced justice for it. Billy lived with his own guilt. He drank heavily, suffered nightmares, died young. The last thing he said to me was, "Doc, we escaped the law, but we never escaped ourselves." I'm writing this because the truth matters. We weren't heroes. We weren't even particularly clever criminals. We were 2 men who made terrible choices, who caused real harm, and who spent the rest of our lives pretending to be someone else. I hope whoever reads this understands there are no clean getaways. You can change your name, change your location, change everything about your external life, but you can't change what you've done. You carry it forever. Robert looked up at William. "Why are you sharing this now?" "Because my great-grandfather was right. Enough time has passed. Everyone involved is dead. My family's reputation won't be destroyed, and the truth deserves to be told completely, including Thompson's own words, his own remorse." The journal was added to the exhibition, and Dr. Martinez worked with William to publish Thompson's confession in an academic journal. The full story, crime, deception, escape, guilt, and belated honesty, became a case study in the complexity of justice and morality in the American West. On a warm spring afternoon in 2025, a ceremony was held at the Arizona Historical Society to permanently install the saloon photograph in their collection. Robert, Dr. Martinez, Eleanor Hayes, and William Grant Thompson all spoke about what the image represented. "This photograph shows us that the Old West wasn't really what we've been taught," Robert said. "It wasn't clear-cut stories of good guys and bad guys, of justice always prevailing. It was messy, complicated, full of people making difficult choices and living with the consequences," William added. "My great-grandfather and Billy Graves weren't heroes, but they also weren't purely villains. They were human beings who did terrible things, felt genuine remorse, and tried to build better lives. That doesn't excuse what they did, but it does make their story worth understanding." Eleanor spoke last. "My grandfather helped them escape. He took their money and kept their secret. He also preserved this photograph, knowing someday it might reveal the truth. Maybe that was his way of confessing, of ensuring that the truth would eventually come out. I choose to believe that." The photograph remained on display, still showing 8 men around a card table in a Tombstone saloon in 1889. But now visitors could see what had been hidden for 135 years. The revolver under the table, the staged performance, the elaborate deception. And they could see something else, too. Something Thompson had written in his journal. "Look closely at Billy's face in that photograph. You'll see he's not afraid of my gun. He's trusting me completely, betting his life that I'll play my part correctly. And look at my face. You'll see I'm terrified, not of him, but of failing him." That photograph captured the moment 2 criminals trusted each other absolutely. It's the only honest thing about that entire day. Robert had examined both faces again after reading Thompson's words, and he'd seen it. Beneath the performances, beneath the deception, 2 men caught in a moment of genuine connection. Outlaws, partners, friends, who would protect each other's secrets until death and beyond. The gun under the table had told one truth, but the faces above it told another, more complicated one, and both truths, finally revealed, became part of history.